All right, here we go. Turn this off and...
Ladies and gentlemen, as part of the Jeremiah Show, welcome to It's Radio with TV's Tim Stack. Now here's the host of the show, a man who at one of his lowest moments would use an elevator ride with actress Shelley Winters to cheer him up. It's TV's Tim Stack. Yeah, me. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of It's Radio with TV's Tim Stack. I have a wonderful guest today who we're going to introduce shortly. I'll quickly tell the Shelley Winters story. I've sort of alluded to it at times, but I was in the throes. This is like 83, 84, and I'm in the throes of therapy. Like I'm trying to figure out why I do the stupid things I do and why I'm afraid of this and not afraid of that and everything. So I had this therapist who was in a building in Westwood that had a lot of therapists in it, the Monty Steakhouse building in Westwood. And the elevator, seemed to be all on the 9th floor. So oftentimes I'm in the throes of therapy. I'm in a haze of like crazy anxiety. And I would ride the elevator sometimes up and down. And it turns out the actress Shelley Winters, who had won Academy Awards for Diary of Anne Frank with Place in the Sun, and she's oftentimes in the same elevator ride up and the same elevator ride down, seeing a different therapist on this floor. And I would sometimes come in there like, how am I going to live? What am I going to do? Shelley Winters would be in this elevator, and she was in such worse shape than me. Like she's talking to the elevator buttons. She's looking, and I don't mean to make fun of her, but it was just like she was in a really rough way. So I ride up and ride down, and Shelley Winters is talking to the elevator, and I would think to myself, I'm not Shelley Winters. Like maybe I'll get there, but I don't think I'll get there. But I would use Shelley Winters just like, yeah, I know. Like I'm really struggling. But I'm not Shelley Winters. So anyway, I don't know if that's the nicest story, but it's a showbiz story in a way. Anyway, Shelley Winters, yeah, talking to herself in the elevator. Anyway, I have a wonderful guest. He's a great old friend. He would be I wish I could live on the East Coast because we would hang out more because we have such a good time. So I'm going to give the drum roll introduction. He ran the Howard Stern channels for Sirius Media, and really at the dawn of Sirius Radio, which we can talk about that. He's the president and CEO of Sabean Media. They do strategic consulting, practice with focus on the entertainment and media brands. This is from LinkedIn. Services include brand development, content creation, talent discovery, development, audience acceleration, engagement strategies, monetization. We love that. Through content and partnership building. Anyway, he's a media guy and he's one of the greats. Please welcome Tim Sabean.
Thank you.
Hey.
Thank you, TV Tim Stack.
Thank you, Tim. We'll see you next week.
Woohoo! Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
Tim, thank you. I really mean that. Like you've been a great friend. And again, I feel like we'd be even better friends if I was on the East Coast because you rarely get out here, and I don't get back there enough anymore. He got my son Doyle an internship on the Stern show.
And Doyle's cutting it up now.
Yeah, he's doing okay. He's doing okay. You got him started. And I would say one funny follow-up to that was at some point, all the interns got together and sued Sirius Media. Do you know about this, Tim?
Yeah, I heard about it. Yeah, that was.
And Doyle gets this letter. Doyle gets this letter from Sirius, like the interns, like the union guys, the interns. And he goes, Dad, they want me to sue Sirius. I said, you are not suing that. Tim Sabean got you an internship. You can thank him and Howard Stern. So
it's all good. All good. All good.
So you've had a really crazy, great career. I want you to talk about take us from your journey from St. Paul, Minnesota. Take us as far, and then we're going to get into your new stuff, but take us as far as getting to Howard Stern. Like, what was that journey?
Well, I grew up in a radio household. My father was in the business, and he was very talented. And when he got out of the Navy, he served in the Korean War. and he was the radio guy. And after when he got out, he got a job as an engineer at KDWB in Minneapolis, which was then WCOW, WCOW, on a country radio station. And he called himself Side Saddle Sam Sherwood. And
so he was on the air.
He was on the air, yeah. And it was Crow Collier Broadcasting. And back in the day of the show Laugh-In, he worked with Gary Owens and Eubanks and all those kinds of guys. And my dad was very creative and a great writer and wrote for many television shows.
I was going to say, didn't he write like for Bob Hope or somebody?
He wrote, well, he did. He was going to be Andy Williams' opening act. And then my mother wouldn't allow him to travel because she, with 5 kids, she knew what that could end up as, so nothing good can happen with that. So she made him stay in the backyard, on a leash. So, but he was very talented, and I was always envious of him and the people that he would hang out with, because back then radio was still theater of the mind, and the skits that they did and the promotions and all this kind of stuff. And it was so exciting because I got to see, like I remember going to see the Beatles when I was 8 years old, and I saw, backstage with Mike Love and the Beach Boys, and Mike Love hands me a piece of paper and he says, "Hey, I wrote the songs on my hand. Can you read the list and tell me, if they're in sync with each other?" And I couldn't barely read then. I'm like 7, 8 years old. I'm just going, yeah. I'm thinking I just screwed up.
What's that word? Vibrations?
Yeah. And I think I just screwed up the entire presentation, the entire concert that night.
That's really funny. That's like a movie bit. That's really funny.
Oh my God, yeah. And I met everybody from Jimi Hendrix to the Lovin' Spoonful to you name it. It was just incredible, the exposure that I had. And so it was nothing, new to me. I was never starstruck and all that kind of thing. I was just a really big fan of the business. And I would remember going to school, and all I did in school was draw pictures of radio stations. And I thought to myself, I don't have to pay attention to this because I'm going into radio. You don't need an education. You don't need to learn history, or you don't need to learn, arithmetic and math and algebra and blah, blah, blah. So, and I worked in the radio station when I was probably 7, 8 years old, emptying wastebaskets and then filing and then production and so forth. So that was my first entry-level position.
And did your dad always stay with country music?
No, he was in country music, then evolved into top 40 and KDWB became one of the top premier radio stations in top 40. It was KDWB in Minneapolis, KFWB in Los Angeles, and KEWB in, I think, was San Francisco.
Those were all owned by
Crow Collier and then RKO eventually.
Right. Wow, that is crazy. Let me ask you something. Was your dad around like with the payola days?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And how did that work? Like,
he would
you may know this name, a guy named Joe Smith. His Julie, his daughter, is a really great friend, and he was a big deal at Warner Brothers Records. And he told me like they would keep cash in an apartment in New York, just like that. Well, that was the business. He said that's
my dad. I remember on Saturday morning, a record guy would show up at our house on a Saturday morning with the latest 45 of the Beatles single or whatever it may be. Right. And, he would run out to the station to drop it off or whatever, and we would play it. But he always taught me, and this was drilled into my head, and it stayed with me my entire career. Never take anything from anyone, ever. And I didn't understand what he meant about that until I got older. And because record people at the time, they would take you to dinner, they try to, entice you to this, to play but I never took anything from anybody. And it was offered to me, believe me, all the time, but never, ever, ever once crossed that line. I remember someone tried to hand me drugs, God rest his soul, he passed on. And I told my direct report at ABC at the time, and I had to sit down and write an entire report on how it happened and this and that. But I was just, as a kid, I respected the business and I respected the rules of the business. And I wasn't enticed or wooed or wowed by, the celebrity part of it and the entertainment part of it. I saw it as a business because I was very blessed with a great dinner table education.
Right.
My dad would talk about people at dinner, or I would constantly go out to the station. Instead of going out to play baseball, I would call a cab company to come and pick me up and take me out to the radio station so I could hang out in the production studio and watch these guys produce commercials or bits. And I would record commercials myself. I did a lot of voice work as a kid at 7, 8, 9, 10 years old.
That was my next question. It's like, when were you never, because and Jeremiah said the same thing. He said he's got a great voice. Were you never went after being on air?
I was on the air since I was a kid, since I can remember. There was no business like show business. There was no business I knew that was more appealing than being on the radio.
And did you have a DJ name?
Well, many. I would go to, this is the craziest thing. I worked in my own hometown of St. Paul, Minnesota, the Twin Cities, near and dear to me, grew up there. And my name is Tim Sabean. Yeah. So the program director at the time says, you were going to give you the name Tim Kelly. I says, why? Nobody knows that. People know I grew up, I went to school here. Why would you change my name? And it was so annoying to me that I just, whatever. But that was the way they thought back in those days. Well, so, I love to get paid.
The most famous DJ to come out of Doylestown, Pennsylvania, he was a DJ for a short period of time. And you probably know him because he went on to run MTV and is Lee Masters. And, yes. But we knew him in Doylestown as Jarl Moan. That's his name. Now, that's a name you want to change. Going from Tim Sabean to Tim Kelly, it's like, that's not that big deal.
And Jarl went to program and run all of public broadcasting, a very, very successful career. Just an incredible human being, too. One of the nicest people you ever want to meet.
Nicest people. Again, he's like, you'd never know he's a gajillionaire. But he was this nerdy kid in Doylestown who would carry, like you, he would carry records around all the time. And
it was my life. It was my life.
Yeah, I remember even as a kid, I remember him reading the back of albums and he just knew that stuff. He was in class with my brother, and now he's back to Jarl Moan. He's he's
my parents down in the basement of our house. My dad and I, we built one of those Heathkit stereo systems, and it was stereo and the amplifier and all this. But we had literally thousands and thousands of records and albums and 45s. And when I was home alone, I would take a stack of them and I would go and play the ones that in all of them, and I would stack the ones that I liked and stack the ones that I didn't like. And I got to know the Allman Brothers, and I got to know John Baldry, and I mean all of these obscure artists and Gordon Lightfoot, I remember, and Elton John and all these kinds of things. And I just, through music discovery, that was my YouTube back then. And I would sit there for hours and hours and listen to music and find my favorites. And it was really fine tuning my palette for, what was good and what wasn't good. And I finally, I took those abilities, and I know sonically what works and what doesn't work on the radio and so forth. So when I went to WLS, they made me the music director, and that was, from there I never looked back.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was wondering how then because I did the same thing. I was like, I used to be an actor, now I'm a writer, and at some point the transition comes in. Usually it's geared towards making a little bit more consistent money, not just so sporadic. And that was my question, is when did you say goodbye to being on the air?
Well, I was on the air it put me through college, and and I had more fun than the law allowed. I would get fired at least 2 or 3 times a year from the radio station for doing some type of antics, or I literally grew up around adults. I was a young kid that had a lot of success at an early age, and I grew up in front of these people, I was the wild child. And I worked very hard. I literally lived at the radio station. I knew every job in the station because I did it. So they would fire me, and they'd figure out 2 weeks later, hey, we don't know how to do this, or so-and-so, or he has all the passes for the computer, so,
hire you back.
They hire me back. So, and then after a while, I said, my dad would always say, look, Tim, there aren't too many 50-year-old disc jockeys. You got to decide what you want to do. And so I sent out 3 tapes and resumes because I couldn't get a job in Minneapolis because everybody knew my reputation. I was a wild child, and they were afraid of me. So I sent one to KFRC in San Francisco. I sent one to in Seattle, I forget the name of it, K whatever it was, 3 letters. I forget what it was, but and then I sent one to
KGO,
WLS.
is it a KGO?
Or KGO? No, that was San Francisco. I can't remember what it was. Anyway, I sent one to WLS in Chicago. So now I'm sitting at KDWB on a winter night, and I get a call from a gentleman by the name of John Guerin. John Guerin was one of the premier program directors in the country and ran WLS for ABC Radio. And he called me up at around, I'll never forget this, around 5 o'clock, and says, "Hi, Tim, this is John Guerin from WLS." And I thought it was one of my friends. I'm going like, "Oh, fuck yourself." And I hung up on him. So
we'll take that. I forgot to mention we're rated PG. So
don't worry. I'm sorry.
Dr. D will take that out. Don't worry.
Okay. Yeah, we'll beep that. So anyway, so I hung up on him, and he called me back. He says, "No, Tim, this is John Guerin. Here's my number." So I called him back. I'm like, "Oh my God, Mr. Guerin, I'm so sorry." He goes, "Oh, we liked your tape and resume. We find you, interesting, and we have a nighttime position at WLS Chicago." I almost fell off my chair. I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" So I said, "I'll be, when do you want to meet?" And so Yeah. So the next day I flew down from Minneapolis to Chicago, and my dad told me, he says, "Look, if you're going to be stupid, at least look smart, wear a suit and a tie," and I did. And I got the job, and I worked there at night on the FM on the air it was about 6 months or so. And they had an opportunity to become the music director of WLS in Chicago. And because I ran the computer and did all the research and things for KDWB in Minneapolis, I was a natural fit for it. So Steve Casey left for MTV, and I replaced him and literally never looked back. It was one of the greatest opportunities of all time, because establishing myself in a major market in Chicago at a premier radio station like WLS, and working with the all-time greats of Larry Lujack and Tommy Edwards, John Records Landecker, Yvonne Daniels, Brent Miller, and it was a dream come true. And so it was at 21 years of age, I had the wind in my face, the sun at my back, and the world at my fingertips.
That's so great. So when you're a kid, I was wondering about this, because and we're going to talk about Howard in the next segment, but Howard grew up, he had Don Imus. Don Imus was on the air. So there was somebody, and all those great New York DJs, Murray the K and all those guys, he grew up with them. So if you're in Minnesota, you only had Minnesota, but were you able to get tapes of other DJs from around the country?
I went one further. I took a wire and I extended it on the roof of the house, the roof line of the house. Yeah. And I made my own antenna, and I sat in my bed at night, and I would plug it into the antenna port, and I would listen at night. I would listen to Extra out of Mexico, if you recall, the Wolfman Jack. Yeah, I would listen to him. I would listen to KAAY out of Little Rock, Arkansas. It was a show called Beaker Street. It was so esoteric and just I would listen to this and just get lost in it. It was such theater of the mind. And then I would listen to WABC. I would listen to WLS, and I would literally lay in bed, and I think, man, will I ever be good enough to ever walk in and work at one of those places? It would just be a dream come true. I'll never have that opportunity. I would wonder what it would be like to be a part of that, because I would listen to these powerful people like John Records Landecker, or I'd listen to these powerful people like Wolfman Jack or WABC. It was just like, whoa. I would just be awed by it. And then for me to get the job at WLS, I'll never forget that as long as I live. I get off the elevator on the 6th floor at WLS, and I walk in the lobby of WLS Radio, and there's the receptionist there sitting there behind this big dark oak wood, lobby, and with the big plush chairs. And I'm like, oh my God, I just made him the studio, looked out over the lobby entrance when you got off the elevator, and looking at Larry Lujack in there, I almost, just lost it right then and there. It was like the elastic in my underwear broke and my socks dropped. It was like, holy crap, I made it.
Okay, we are going to take our first break. I'm talking to Tim Sabean, old friend, great media guy, just, as insane a career in radio as has ever walked down the path, I think, and can tell you everything which we're catching up on, but also just a great guy. Now we're in the next segment. We'll come back and we'll talk how we met and the whole Howard Stern thing. So you are listening to It's Radio with TV's Tim Stack.
Woohoo!
Woohoo!